Welcome to the Earthworks Podcast, where our team will share the jargon of carbon from many of our turf friends from the past 30 years.
Hi, everybody. This is Joel Simmons, and this is another Earthworks Podcast. And I'm very excited to be talking to my friend Cory Blair, who I've known since 1999. Cory is the business development manager at Capillary Flow, or as many people will know it, the Capillary Concrete process, which is a hardscape for bunkers, and there's a whole lot of stuff going on, from what I understand, Cory. I mean, you and I have been running into each other a bunch of dog and pony shows. I think we ran into each other out of the country a couple of weeks ago, up
Yes,
in
we did.
up in the greater Northwest and in Canada. But you and I go back. So let's talk about you a little bit first. You and I first met when you were, where were you? I don't even remember now.
I was at Tantalon Country Club in Fort Washington, Maryland, which is now National Harbor Golf Club. Was working for KSL Fairways at the time.
That's right.
And had gone up there. I grew up in Northern Virginia, and it was living in Tennessee when I took the job at Tantalon, because I had to go back up there to get my first superintendent's job, just because the Tennessee market was so tight at the time.
Yeah. This was late 90s.
Yeah, 99.
Yeah.
Yep.
All I remember is it used to call me all the time and ask me questions, which was good. I liked it. We would talk.
Well, I remember the
quite a bit.
first time I met you was at you came up and did basically a couple hours of education for all of our superintendents at one of our
Soils
regional
class,
meetings.
Yeah.
And what you were teaching really resonated with me, and I've used it for years. I've drilled it into all the assistants I had over the years, but it was, you get the soil right, the plant takes care of itself.
Yeah, that's a bunch of hogwash. You know that.
And
crap.
all
you need is
really
nitrogen. Just put down nitrogen and you're fine. Soil schmoil.
Exactly, you're good. But that was the big thing you were pushing us toward, was you guys make this too hard. It's really not that hard to grow grass and grow healthy grass. And we don't focus enough on the soil. We're more worried about the plant, but if you focus on the soil, the plant tends to take care of itself and is a much healthier version of itself.
And that's true. The part about it's not hard to grow grass isn't so true. That's not easy to grow, especially where you were. I mean, you were in the Mid-Atlantic.
Mid-Atlantic was brutal.
Yes.
How I managed a couple years up there with bent grass wall to wall.
Yeah.
That would have driven a lot of people out of the business. That was the most.
Oh no, it did drive a lot of people out of the business, or to California. I interviewed a couple of folks who left Maryland, went to California. Kevin Pryzeski was one of them. I love his story. He got out of Cattail Creek and hightailed it to Napa so he could drink wine and get away from humidity.
I ended up going further south where I have Bermuda grass.
Yeah, Cory, get out of there and get some real grass, grass that can tolerate that. And it's interesting now because, as you know, Bermuda grass is creeping into Maryland pretty aggressively right now, and zoysia grass is as well. So It's pretty interesting. But how long were you a superintendent?
Let's see. First superintendent's job was 99, and let's see. I got into sales in 08, so 9 years as a superintendent, plus another 4 as an assistant before.
Where'd you go to school?
So I went to Auburn.
You know, you're one of the guys. I've told many people the story, probably even on the podcast, but there's a handful of guys in this country that I always thought were students of mine at Rutgers, and you're one of them. I've always have in my head, for some reason, I don't know if it's the timing of when we met or what, but I always had this impression that, oh yeah, he went to Rutgers. No, he didn't go to Rutgers. I met him otherwise, but you're one of the phantom students of mine that I've always enjoyed talking to. But
you can claim me. I have no problem with that.
That's fine. Where did you go to? What did you do after superintendent? You didn't go right to Capillary Concrete. You went elsewhere.
No. So the quick story was building a golf course for a developer in Tennessee. We built it in-house, so it took a little longer than it should have because we had road builders basically building a golf course.
Yeah, that's always fun.
Yeah.
Somebody doesn't know what the hell they're doing building a golf course.
No, but you know what? It was a really great experience. But we opened the golf course October 5th of 07, and it was a Bob Cup design. First Audubon signature golf course in the state of Tennessee. Was an absolute incredible experience. that I wouldn't trade for anything. But we opened the golf course October 5th of 07. The economy tanked the
Yeah.
week of Thanksgiving of 07. And the developer fired the bulk of the senior staff December 17th of 07. So a
That
week before
quickly.
Christmas, we all got let go. Um,
What happened to the property then?
the developer got sued by one of his partners and ended up losing the golf course in the settlement. Of course, 3 to 4 months after I left the golf course, they unsealed a 16 count federal indictment against the developer. So in a way, looking back at it, it was probably one of the biggest blessings I've ever had in my career. I got out before things got really, really bad.
And you were dragged into the lawsuits and the criminality of it all. Yeah.
Luckily none of that happened.
Digging holes to hide money somewhere in the back of the property. Yeah.
It was crazy. But again, looking back, probably one of the biggest blessings of my career.
Yeah.
I remember talking to my wife at the time it happened, and she said, "Well, what do you think you want to do?" And the only definitive answer I had was I wanted to stay in golf.
Good.
I wanted to stay in the golf industry. It's the first job I ever had was in the golf industry. The only jobs I've ever had have been in the golf industry.
Are you a golfer?
I'm not a good golfer.
Okay.
No.
All right.
Much to my father's dismay, because my father when I was younger he was a single digit handicapper.
Oh boy.
I think playing golf with me and trying to teach me how to golf was probably the biggest frustration of his entire life.
Worse than teaching how to drive a car?
Yeah. I picked up on the car pretty quick. Golf,
you didn't hit him with a club or anything. You didn't knock him in the back of the head with a driver or anything, did you?
No. It's and part of it is when you work on a golf course, you're out in the heat and everything. In the summer, the last thing you want to do when you get done is spend more time on that golf course. I was looking for air conditioning and something cold to drink.
Right. Exactly.
That's all I wanted at the end of the day. It was simple.
Yeah. And then a nap.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But so the next step in doing the golf course in-house, we had hired a couple of guys to kind of run our irrigation install, and they would lay the pipe and everything. Well, I did a lot of the satellite installation myself and wiring my boxes and troubleshooting, and ended up doing a lot with the programming of my central computer with the help of my Rainbird rep at the time. But I was very hands-on, and little did I know that would kind of lead me into the next phase of my career, because in April of 08, I went to work for Stovall, who was the Rainbird distributor in Georgia, Alabama, and the Panhandle. And they hired me on, and because I had been so hands-on with the irrigation installation, and irrigation was always kind of one of my focuses wherever I was working.
Yeah, it's kind of fun. There's a lot of cool things going on with irrigation. It is, and really, I'm
not pretty good at it. It was just one of those things that you learn and you get good at it, and it was something I enjoyed, believe it or not.
Yeah.
So ended up there, and my manager that had hired me was planning on, I was his replacement. He was going to stick around a couple years, and then I was going to step into that role as sales manager. So that happened, and Stovall was a family-owned company, single owner, third generation, just a great company, and I worked for them for 12 years.
Oh, I didn't know you were there that long. I remember when you were there, but yeah. I'd run into you at trade shows even when you were working for Rainbird, yeah.
So good experience, and going back to the getting fired from the golf course being the biggest blessing, or probably one of the greatest blessings of my career. My children were in kindergarten and first grade at the time that happened.
Oh, hi, Daddy, you're home. Why are you home? Why are you home, Daddy?
Exactly. So transitioning over to sales allowed me to go to their games on the weekends. It allowed me to coach. It allowed me to be very involved in their life, which, looking back, that never would have happened had I been a superintendent. I wouldn't have been able to devote the time.
Yeah.
Because in the summer you're working weekends for the most part.
Right.
And it just really allowed me to be involved with them where they needed me.
You were traveling though a little bit at that point, right?
A little bit. I was in Atlanta, but my longest travel, I'd be down maybe in Pensacola or Mobile. It was a 5-hour drive. I'd be gone a couple of days and back home. So it wasn't. It was.
Let me qualify this by saying sales is not easy. So a lot of superintendents seem to think that, oh, when I retire, I'll just go into sales. That'll be easy. There's nothing easy about it. The pressures are intense or as intense, but they're different. They're now, a lot of them are self-imposed or results imposed, where, obviously golf and sports turf are the same, but yeah, there's it's a whole different dance, and not everybody's, qualified or suited for it, but you obviously have done well.
And the biggest thing in sales that it's true, that's really different from managing a golf course, is you're not dealing with Mother Nature. The
Yeah.
biggest, the thing that kind of nobody that is in the golf industry or that isn't in the golf industry understands is the biggest hurdle we have as golf managers or golf course superintendents is the weather.
Yeah,
The
exactly.
one thing that dictates almost everything you do, you have zero control over.
Well, golfers are a problem too, but that's a whole different story. But
You can
yeah,
deal with golfers.
yeah,
I could
kind of.
turn
Yeah.
irrigation on a golfer that pissed me off, and
Right.
it may not fix the thing, but it would make me feel better.
Yeah, that's
So,
all that matters. At the end of the day, you walk home, you feel satisfied.
but I don't know a lot of guys that lose sleep worrying about their sales position.
Yeah.
You might have a big bid coming up, and you're worried about that, but it's not constant. There's a lot more highs.
Well, I mean,
in
in sales, you still have to meet numbers. And so there's a pressure, there's definitely a pressure there. But, I mean, in this day and age in golf, it's not been horrible, but it's still suited to the right people. There's definitely people that, and they should be vetted that way, but there's definitely people that are not going to ever be successful in sales.
Well,
But
and
a good company will vet that.
Well, one of the funniest things that happened to me after I got into sales were a lot of guys that I'd known in the industry for years basically looked at me and said, "I can't believe it took you this long."
Well, you've got the personality. Yeah, you
And
got it.
that's
Yeah,
exactly what they were saying.
Yeah.
So,
All right. So you left Rainbird and went to.
well, Rainbird made a switch of the distribution in Georgia. They brought in Ewing Irrigation. Ewing had already had the Rainbird Golf distribution in the Carolinas.
Right.
And Rainbird decided they wanted to consolidate some things, so they gave Ewing Georgia and the Panhandle. And I followed the golf over to Ewing. Worked with a great team at Ewing for a couple of years, and it was very easy for them because I had managed the distributorship in Georgia. I knew what was selling. I knew where the hot spots were. I brought the knowledge with me from the market. 12 years of the market knowledge came with me. Great company to work for, and Ewing is one of our largest distributors of capillary concrete.
Okay.
So that's kind of where that
Yeah.
tie-in came from. And after a couple of years, Ewing or Capillary made a change in their sales manager position, kind of restructured some things, and brought me on as business development manager. So I manage our relationship with our current distributors. And then I'm tasked with adding new distributors in North America for the most part, starting to branch out into Central and South America a little bit as well. But right now, my focus has been on the U.S. and Canada and in adding to our distribution footprint.
Capillary is not part of Rainbird, though, is it? It's not.
No.
What was the connection there? What was the relationship?
Just it was a golf. Ewing has such a strong golf representation with their sales guys and their footprint, especially on the East Coast, that gave them another door, if you will, to get into some golf courses. Like typically a Rainbird salesman, if you've got a diehard Toro irrigation superintendent, it's hard to get any time or any face time with the guy or even get in the door. Whereas Capillary allowed them to get in the door with some of these guys.
There you go.
It gave them something that they could sell and make some more connections, if you will.
Yeah, parallel
on
marketing.
our end,
Yeah.
From the Capillary end, it's great because I've got a sales team that is trained incredibly well with Ewing. Their footprint is great, and it's a very good supplemental product for them to sell on golf courses.
Yeah. So, I ran into you, I guess a couple of years ago now down at the Carolina show, and I obviously, shockingly in a bar, and we were chatting about what Capillary is all about. And I wanted to bring Cory on because I think it's a great conversation to help folks understand what this product is all about. And we don't usually we don't usually do a big sales pitch, and that's not really what this is about. But I think it's a technology that if somebody listening is not familiar with, I think it's something that they should at least, especially if they're about to, do some construction or reconstruction, which is probably as big for you guys, I'm assuming, as construction is the reconstruction and rebuilding of bunkers. But let's start with, I mean, we know it as capillary concrete. You now call it capillary flow, but start at the beginning and explain, just explain the basics of what we're talking about with capillary concrete. And for somebody that's not familiar with the process at all, let's just kind of start at the beginning and walk us through what the heck is this stuff?
So capillary, we'll call it the capillary material, which is actually the concrete. It is
You
a
just don't want
pervious
to call it
concrete.
concrete, do you?
Well, so the first day I started with the company, we actually had a meeting with management, and the discussion was we need to change our name from
Yeah.
capillary concrete, and we changed to capillary bunkers at the time because we were getting some pushback from some architects and even some club management and stuff, because their thought process was it's a hard sell to go to a membership and say we want to put concrete in your bunkers.
Yeah,
You
I
know,
would think there'd
people,
be a branding issue there because
yes,
it's not really concrete, is it?
no.
Where did they even come up with that name and why? Any idea?
So the concrete has a capillary effect in we move water both up and down in the concrete.
Okay.
So, and the way it moves is by that capillary action. It's going from an area of higher pressure to lower pressure. So
Right.
so that's where the capillary came from. We're actually moving it through the concrete both up and down,
So the
which is very,
purpose of this material is to keep the bunker dry,
yes.
basically, and
But it
and some
also,
stability for the edges to keep the bank, the faces still stable, keep the stand where it's supposed to be.
yes.
But most importantly, it moves water out of the system, so you're not pumping bunkers every time it rains.
It moves the water very quickly through. The infiltration rate of the concrete alone is 100 inches an hour.
Wow, I had no idea.
It's
That's fantastic.
it's crazy. But we also, the other side of that capillary action is when things start to dry down, we're actually going to start moving a little water back up out of the native soil into that lower layer of sand. So what that does, one of the issues a lot of guys have, especially courses that have flashed faces, very steep faces
Yeah.
on their bunkers, the faces dry down so much faster than the floor of the bunker. So it's almost like you're maintaining two different types of sand at
Yeah.
that point. It's hard to keep the consistency across the bunkers. The bunker doesn't play like it's supposed to, because if the moisture in the sand is right, the ball will hit on that face and then it's going to release and roll down to the floor of the bunker, where you've got a relatively flat lie, and the bunker is going to perform as it was designed to perform.
Yeah.
If the sand dries down, you end up with a risk of a fried egg lie. You're stuck up on that slope. You're trying to get a stance, and it doesn't sit well with the golfers. So what that capillary action back up allows us to do is maintain the consistency, A, in individual bunkers between the slopes and the floor, and then B, across the entire golf course, which kind of runs contrary to what a bunker is supposed to be. A bunker is supposed to be a hazard. They're not
Right.
supposed to be perfect. We spend so much money and time maintaining bunkers that it frustrates a lot of superintendents. It truly does. So one of the capillary action allows us to take some of those frustrations off the superintendents, because a lot of times if you get the consistency across the golf course, a lot of those complaints are going to go away. You're still going to get a complaint from Mr. X who shot, he had 5 shots out of a bunker, and he had the worst round of his life,
He
and it's
missed
your
them all
fault.
because he doesn't know how to hit a bunker shot.
And that's exactly it. But for the most part, your regular golfers and your low handicap, even your mid handicap golfers, are really going to appreciate the consistency in the bunkers.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter if you're on 18, if you're on 4, if you're on 1.
Yeah.
They're constructed correctly and everything. The consistency is going to be there with the capillary material.
How's this material affecting the rest of the golf course? You keep mentioning the rest of the golf course, but I mean, I'm assuming this is just a bunker issue, but it's beyond that.
It's just a bunker issue as far as drainage. Now, we have started a new vertical for us, which is we're calling it capillary hydroponics, and that's where the flow comes in, because we're actually flowing water.
Hence the change of the name. Yeah.
Hence the change in name, because the capillary flow kind of covers everything. But essentially, what the hydroponics system allows us to do is, and I'm going to use a tee as an example. So if we take a regular size tee, let's say 1,000 square foot tee, kind of square, we're going to divide that tee in half. We're going to core it out. We go down 12 inches. We've got a layer of gravel or coarse sand on the bottom to level it. We put a pond liner in the floor of the tee, and there is a dividing line down the middle of the tee. Whether it's side to side or front to back, doesn't matter, just depends on the orientation of the tee. So what we do at that point, pond liner goes up and over that barrier, and then we come into the bottom and we pour 2 inches of capillary material.
The same material that you would use in the bunker.
Same material in the bunkers. Now, I missed a step. Before we do that, we put a 4-inch tile, a slotted drain tile in.
So you have a place for it to go.
The middle of each side.
Yeah.
So we've got 2 tiles on each side. In the middle of the tee, we can go off the tee a little bit, but in the middle, as in like basically front to back, wherever our dividing line is, let's just say we divided the tee front to back. There's a basin that's about the size of a 55-gallon drum. It's all HDPE. But we drop that basin in, and there are 3 chambers in that basin. We've got a water fill. We bring a 1-inch line in from the irrigation system. There's a float valve on it. We've got an overflow drain that ties just a 4-inch piece that in the bottom of the basin that will go out to wherever your drainage is. If we tie it into an existing line, we just daylight it. And then what we do on top of the capillary, it's 6 to 8 inches, again, depending on what we're trying to achieve with the depth of a coarse sand. There's no organic matter in it. There's no soil. It's strictly coarse sand. So we fill up both sides with that. And then what we do is we'll fill one side of the tee. And it's essentially turns into 2 basins, if you will. So what we're doing is we'll fill the one side, and we can set the fill level where we want it. So if you're establishing seed, let's say let's just say, you're overseeding,
right,
we can bring the water right up to the surface and actually have a little bit of ponding on the surface to help germination. It'll speed germination along. And then as that seedling starts to grow, we'll start lowering the water a little
How's
further
that
down.
done? How do you move water up and down? I mean, you're doing that mechanically?
Yes, well, we've got an air pump. It's essentially
Okay, so there is a mechanical
bottom.
process by which you can you can change the level of moisture in that profile.
Yes. It's essentially a large aquarium pump is all we're doing.
Yeah.
So once we get that one side filled, the other side is empty. And then at a duration of your choice, and again, that duration is going to change based on what you're trying to do, even the time of the year. So let's just say, for example, we're going to do it every 6 hours. We're going to pump the water out of the side that's full, pull it down out of that side, and we're going to pump it into the other side. So we're essentially just we're pouring from
moving
one
it from one side to the other, yeah, back and forth.
We're moving it through the bottom. So as we're pulling the water out of the side that was full, we're pulling oxygen into the soil. And as we're pushing it up in the other side that's empty, pushing out all the CO2 and oxygenating the soil with that oxygenated water, because the air pump is obviously, we're going to putting bubbles in it and just oxygenating the water. So
that's fascinating. How much soil are we talking about? How much soil on top of this process, or mix?
6 to 8 inches of sand, and that's it. You're going to grow into the sand. You're either going to sod on top of the sand, you're going to sprig into it, or you're going to seed into it.
Okay.
So
now I'm going to ask the obvious earthworks question. We can still amend that sand so we can build a better growing environment, and that's not going to affect this process, this hydroponic process.
The biggest things that we're getting, the biggest advantages of the hydroponic system is you're going to cut down on water. After the first year, we've got some test plots in with at Michigan State with Dr. Nikolai. We've got 3 USGA greens and 3 capillary greens side by side.
So you're doing this on greens, you're doing it on tee boxes.
But the greens at Michigan State are flat. We're still trying to work out the undulations in the green and how we manage that water in those undulations. That's where it starts to get really tricky, but we're well on our way to that. But the tees are just, to discuss it, the tees are just easier because they're flat. It's easy to explain where everything's going. But after the first year of data from Dr. Nikolai, which was 22, we saw an 80% reduction in water from the USGA to ours.
On the green.
On the greens.
Yeah. How about on the tee box? Do you have any data like that on
It's going to be close to the same thing.
Okay. And it's a little bit easier to work because of the nature of how the tee
Yes.
is built. Yeah.
Yes. So that number is probably going to drop as we add more data to it.
Yeah.
You know, we continue to get data. And obviously if you have a drought, it's going to affect some things. But even if we're above 50% water reduction, that is a huge amount of water.
No, absolutely. In certain parts of the country, that's millions of dollars.
Well,
So,
take for example, Las Vegas and Clark County, January 1st, they cut their water usage for golf courses in Las Vegas City and Clark County. They went from 6.3 acre feet to 4.2. They took a third of their water away that they can use on those golf courses. So in an
wow.
instant like
And
that,
out there, they're paying, millions
they're
of dollars a
paying
year.
dramatically for that water.
Yeah.
Those numbers are big. So it would allow them to use the water they were putting on tees elsewhere on the golf course and still fall into their guidelines for
Yeah.
water usage. The other big thing we see happening, and we're working on this now, is right now our monitoring package, we can measure salinity, pH, and temperature in that water. So you can kind of see a little bit of what's going on, but right now our engineers are working on kind of a more robust monitoring package. And ultimately, our goal is to be able to monitor the fertility in the water and turn the tee into a true hydroponic system in every sense of the
Almost a
word.
fertigation system.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So you would be able to, in which for the environmentalists, it's going to eliminate any phosphate runoff, any nitrate runoff.
It's all contained.
Everything in this basin. So in areas like, well, countries like Canada, where they really limit what they can apply fertility wise,
in a lot of states and a lot of counties now,
it's going to make a huge difference there. And just another side effect of the lower water usage that we see at Michigan State is there's a lot less disease, because every time you push that water up and down, you're drying any dew off that's there. Because that air,
that makes sense. Yeah, it's almost, it makes perfect sense.
It gets rid of the dew, so that the crown of the plant, especially in the early mornings where we see the dollar spot and the brown patch and everything else, those come from that crown staying too wet.
It's actually keeping it dry enough to dry the dew down. Cory, let me go back just because, my job is to be the stupid one here, and I'm pretty good at it. So let me go back. So explain again, and I'm going to have some questions along the way, but go back to the beginning of the construction. So you're digging out, basically, there's two channels, both of which would shift water back and forth. Walk me through simply again the process of how this is built on a tee.
So we're going to core the tee out, and it would be similar to what you're doing in a green. You're going to core it out because you've got what you need to put in. Like we want a minimum of 6 inches of sand for our growing medium.
Right.
You got 2 inches of capillary. You've got 2
so
inches
you got 6 inches of sand, and then you've got your 2 inches of capillary. What's below the capillary?
Just gravel.
Just the heavier gravel. So you have a place to go.
And then the liner. So the liner just turns it into a basin. It allows us to.
And it holds moisture. It holds the water.
Yes. So, and then before the capillary goes in, we do 4-inch ADS tile, like I said, slotted tile that we run the length of the tee. We've got a boot that goes through.
To move it out or to move it away?
Both. No. That's how we're putting the water into the tee.
That's how you're getting it in. Okay, that's why I'm asking stupid questions.
That's our feed basically.
Gotcha. I see now.
4-inch tile. So what we're doing is filling from the bottom. We fill that basin from the bottom, and the water comes up through the capillary.
Gotcha.
Basically, but the capillary gives us that bridge between the growing medium and the gravel. It would almost be the equivalent of the choker layer in a USGA green.
Yep. I was just going to ask that. Yeah, that's what it sounds like. And that can hold moisture, and it can also drain moisture. I mean, it sounds like a paradox, but that makes sense because it is, it is capillary, it is porous. So when it's wet, you can saturate it and bring the water up. And when you're in a rainy season, all that water is moving down through the capillary. You're able to get rid of it, or is it being?
Yes, we have an overflow. There's an overflow in the basin.
Okay.
So the water would go over essentially a weir in that basin. and into that third chamber. And at the bottom of that third chamber, there's a 4-inch stub out that we would hook 4-inch solid drain tile to get the water.
Now,
We
is that a
doubled it.
manual? Is that a manual process that the superintendent
It's
would?
passive.
It's
It's
passive, so that
passive.
it's just happening
Once
just as
once
an
we
oh,
get those water levels set on
gotcha.
each side and we get that equilibrium, anything extra that comes in goes over that weir, and it's a completely passive way to manage it. Now we can also, with the air pump, if we've got to do some work or there's something weird going on, we can drain it with the air pump as well.
Gotcha.
So, but the plumbing that goes from side to side, where we're moving the water from side to side, we can flip that over into that third chamber, which is the drain essentially, and pump that water completely out of the system. If
Now
we ever
that's
need to
that. Where's that decision made? Is that done passively, or is that a decision made by the management?
It would be a decision made by management to
Okay.
drain that down. Now, the water level where we set it, that's made by management. That's that,
How do they know what is there? There has to be some indicator as what the water levels. There's some kind of a
yes. We've
there's
got a little, it's a little control package that goes with it. And the other thing with the product, depending on where it is, we can either power it with 110, like if you're close to you've got an irrigation box close, something like that, we can pull power off
you
of
can
that,
hook it
or
off of that.
we've got a
Yeah.
solar cell we can mount that will do more than power the system. Again, that air pump doesn't take a lot of power, so it makes it very easy to install this system almost
So
anywhere.
you would
You don't
have an air pump. Let's say I have 4 T's on a complex. Would I have one of these pumps for each of the 4 boxes,
You would have
or would
one
it?
basin. The pumps are in the basin, so you would have a basin per T.
Okay, so
So
I'd
if
have
you've got 4 T's, we're actually going to have 8 chambers and
right
four
and
basins.
4 basins.
Yes.
Gotcha.
Yes.
Now, again, I'm going to ask stupid questions because I've mastered that skill over my many years of doing this. Um, the water sitting there, I mean, does it ever get contaminated? I mean, could it build up too much fertility? I mean, is it, I mean, are you catching pesticides, fungicides in there? I mean, what's the con of that process of holding? I'm thinking of a little bathtub underneath my green, and then opening it up, and it just smells like high heaven. I mean, that's what's going through my little pea brain here. So walk me through that stupid question.
That's some of the stuff we're working on right now. And I'm going to be completely honest with you. A lot of this stuff we're learning as we go.
I bet.
We're trying some things, and it's the true meaning of invention.
Yeah, yeah,
You fail way more than you succeed, but you got to fail to figure out where the
yeah,
success line, where that line is.
yeah,
So we're
exactly.
still trying to figure out now. Your inputs on your fertility are going to be dramatically less.
Why?
Instead of, well, because everything's absorbed into the root. You're not trying to break down. Like when you put a granular product down, you're losing a lot of that because you're releasing a bunch of it, and the plant can only take up so much. The rest of it just flushes through
Right.
the soil. And God forbid you put it down and have a heavy rain. If that's the case, you're going to lose it all.
Yeah.
I mean, in theory,
A
it's
lot
just
of it.
gonna
Yeah.
it's just
Right.
gonna flush, depending on the solubility of the product, it's just gonna flush right through the
Right.
soil. So the numbers are gonna be
So we'll go back to that. Why would fertilize? I mean, because it's catching it in the basin and then being submitted into the plant
well,
environment.
no, because just the bulk of it is gonna be much more available to the plant. Like if you think about spraying your greens, you're gonna put a lot less of a soluble product that you're spraying out with your sprayer than you're gonna put out um, as a granular application with a spreader.
Right.
Because it's in solution, it's hitting every part of the plant basically, or the distribution is much more even, if you will. When you're putting a granular product out, there's especially if you have one, let's say that's high in N, and you put it out a little high, you end up with your green looks like it's got polka dots on it.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
where the larger particles hit, you've got really dark green polka dots and some lesser green, and you can have some yellow. It's so
This
with
is
it
why you
being
got
in
to use
solution,
545, by the way. But yeah, that's all right.
like, if you put it in solution, it's going up much more uniformly into the plant.
Because of the
So
process of the capillary action
yes,
within the base.
yes. Now, one thing we
Interesting.
have found is, again, you don't really want to make a granular application on a capillary tee because you tend to put down so much more material, and if you get a heavy rain, that all stays in solution. So in that case,
Of a
you might
synthetic
have
you're
to
referring to
flush.
now. Yeah.
Yes. So at that point, you're going to have to flush. You would end up pumping that down, add more water. We've had a couple of issues like that where we had some overspray, if you will, with the granular product, and we ended up with a lot more nitrogen in solution than we thought. And it was something that it was kind of an aha moment for us. Like,
Yeah.
okay, this is something now we need to think about and kind of backtrack how we're going to manage some of these things. So we're kind of the the monitoring package doesn't exist yet. It's well on the way, but we're learning as we go, and we're coming up with ideas to add some things. So the product, as far as the fertility is going, is very much in its infancy. Like, to realize the full potential of this product, I think it's very much in its infancy right
How long have
now.
you
It
guys had
allows
it
us
out? How long have you had it in the market?
we've had some teas in Europe for 5 years now.
So you've had years to kind of study it. Let me ask you the $1 million question. What happens with salty water? Is it accumulating salts in the capillary concrete itself? I mean, would it
It
not
doesn't.
hold more salt than normal? I mean, common sense, at least in my head, would think that process like this might hold some of these contaminants.
Well, you're still going to treat the tea like you would a green, essentially, I think, in the fact that you're going to want to flush it every now and then
Okay.
with a
So you're
calcium
still managing
product.
it.
Yes, you're still going to manage that because that problem isn't going to go away. I mean, that's always
Yeah,
going
but
to
if
be there.
you got salty water and then it's holding in the capillary and then you're pushing the water back up, is that not just putting salt water back into the
In
root zone?
that case, what we would probably do is we would be dumping a little bit of water and adding some fresh water on a regular basis.
So you could manage that. So there would be a solution to kind of keeping the
Yes.
salinity at bay. The other
Yeah.
question that comes to my mind is, and you may not have the answer to this, but what's the effect biologically in that root zone? Is it affecting microbiology? Is it helping to promote it? Is it slowing it down? I would think with salt, water, it'd be a problem, but
We don't know that answer yet.
all right. Good
Honestly, I mean,
answer.
but that's something we're looking at now. In addition to some other things, is that's a question we've all asked: is what does this do to the microbiome in that soil?
Yeah.
What are your bugs? What do your bugs look like in the soil when you let
Could
it?
could you do this with a soil mix? If you had I mean, it's pretty vogue right now to do a 80-10-10 with a peat or a combination soil peat, or is it too hard, or is it too hard to work through
It
any
would be
kind
too
of?
hard to work through that because the peat, there, those are the where you start to get into the smaller particles, and that's where you start to lose the pore space.
Gotcha. Yeah, that makes
So,
sense.
one of the we want to keep that pore space open in the soil because that's what's allowing us to keep the plant so much
Yeah.
healthier, really. Now, another thing that we're working on right now, we've actually got a couple of sites in, but the next logical step for us as far as that system went was geothermal. So what we've done on a couple of test sites now is we've
Yeah, you were
gone
telling me
down
this.
3 feet below the floor of what the subgrade of that typical tea would be, and we're laying in some 1 inch ABS pipe or ADS pipe in like or HDPE pipe. I
Yeah,
apologize,
yeah.
HDPE pipe. And when we're pumping from one side to the other, instead of going right from one basin to the other, we're going down through that geothermal pipe.
So you're
We're
bringing
leaving
back temperatures that are
we're
closer to
picking up
50.
Yes, we're either bringing up the temperature a little bit or down a little bit. So
Right.
the area you think the biggest significance there is going to be in these northern areas where you might be able to add a cut like maybe 2 to 3, even 4 extra weeks of growth onto that tea because you're keeping the
Keep the
soil a
course
little bit
open
warmer.
longer. Yeah.
So you're going to be able to extend your growing season.
Yeah.
And we all know, especially up north, the stronger your turf goes into winter, the better it's going to come out in the
Yeah.
spring.
Yeah. Why we
So,
advocate dormant feeding so much.
well, that's exactly, you want to get it as healthy as you can going to bed. So when it wakes up in the spring, it's healthy. So this would allow us to extend that growing season a little bit. So if there is some injury, let's say during the summer, they had a drought, got real hot, there was some injury, it allows us to grow that turf just a little bit longer in the fall. So it's not as weak as it would be otherwise.
Yeah. Have you done this on a larger scale, like a soccer field?
Our other, not yet, but we are working on that. That's another vertical for us as sports
Yeah.
fields where we're actually We're looking to do some soccer fields, and we've actually just signed an agreement in Europe to do a soccer field. But before the soccer fields came in, we've been doing it on equestrian arenas.
Oh, really?
So it's our founder's wife rides, and our owner Martin Sternberg started playing around a little bit because he got to thinking, well, this would be great for an arena. So what it does, and our U.S. headquarters are in Wellington, Florida, which is the West Palm Beach area, and
Yeah.
there are a lot of
Lots
people
of
that
horses
ride.
down there. So a couple
Yes.
dollars maybe floating around that town.
So the way that system works down there is very similar to the hydroponics. We're pushing water up through the capillary, and then instead of a growing medium, you've got a footing, which is sand for the most part.
Right, right. You're not growing grass, but you're keeping the
No,
thing
but
from
you're
being
keeping the
wet.
footing. So what it
Yeah.
allows us to do, the biggest issue they've had, and I haven't done a whole lot of work with the equestrian, but I've listened and picked up a little bit from
Yeah.
our folks that do it. The biggest issue, let's say if somebody has an indoor arena or a covered arena, is there's no easy way to get water on that without slinging it onto the sides of the building and everything else. And it's hard to really keep consistency there as well with
Yeah.
using those big water cannons. So what it allows us to do is and change that footing, like the consistency of the footing, depending on where we put that water level. And ultimately you figure these people that are spending millions on these horses, and especially down there with the polo horses, a horse takes a wrong step and breaks a leg, that
That's a
horse is pretty much
couple $1
done.
million of loss right there.
And yeah, exactly. And if the soil's too wet, it's slippy, turns muddy, that kind of thing, the horse slips, we can eliminate a lot of that with our footing
Yeah.
because again, you get a heavy rain even on
Yeah,
an
but then you're going to
outdoor.
ruin the mudders, man. All the mudders that are making money on a wet
At
track.
that point, you bring the water level right up to the top, and we can turn it into a mud pit. I mean, honestly, we have the capability to do that.
Hey, I want
But
my horse running on mud, pal. Come on, make this.
it allows you, if you've got a jumper, let's say, depending on where their next competition may be, the footing's going to vary place to place, arena to arena. So
Yeah.
the other thing it allows them to do is while they're training, it allows them to fine tune that footing for what they're trying to do.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Does that make sense? Like,
Yeah, yeah. Now,
so
I mean, on a, and I know this is out of our, golf course conversation, but on a scale that big, how does it function? I mean, I can see it working on a green, or a tee box, 5,000 square foot, circumference, but you're talking a lot of square foot on a soccer field or on a racetrack. Is it work? I
in a
mean, is it
situation like
multiple
that,
channels, multiple,
yes,
yeah. So
yes.
it's just box
That's
after box after box all the way around the track.
well, again, it depends on the site, and
Yeah.
we can kind of tailor our equipment to the site. So
Gotcha.
not every site is the same. Some, if it's not a huge area and everything's compact, we can get away with one basin. If we've got multiple arenas or it's a very large arena,
Right,
it'll
right.
be basins. And
I mean,
again, I don't deal with a lot of the installs on
I don't
that. I
blame
do
you.
installs,
Probably
but
wouldn't want to either. It's a
what I
funny
know
group
about
of
the
people.
equestrian is what I've picked up.
Yeah, and you probably want to stay away anyway. Let's go back to the T-box because I'm fascinated by the whole science of this. So clear, what was the number you gave us on water savings? 40%?
I think when we ultimately get our numbers, we're going to be well north of 50%.
Oh, okay,
I think we're going to be
40% plus.
60%. Yes.
Now, let me ask you this: how many tees in function? How many tees do you actually have out in the field right now? I mean, how many of these are out there? How new is
So
this process in the States?
a couple of years old,
Okay.
basically. So, and again, the research at Michigan State, they're greens, but I would equate. I mean, we can use the
Same
same data.
complex,
Really.
yeah. It makes more sense for a tee box. It might be easier,
Yes.
especially if you've got undulations, obviously, in a green. But for a tee
Well,
box and keeping it going. Are there clubs that you can talk about that actually have this in place?
we're not ready to talk about a lot of
Okay,
this.
that's fine. I'm pushing.
Now, I will say we are doing some joint research with GCSAA and the USGA at TPC Las Vegas,
Gotcha.
where we've done three or four hydroponic tees there. And then we're also doing a drip line on three or four more, like the same hole. So the tees are relatively close together. And what they're doing is they'll excavate the tee out, they'll lay a netafim drain tile down just in a serpentine pattern
Yeah,
or like drip tubing,
yeah.
and then put soil on top, and we've got a water meter on each of the tees, both the Netafim and the capillary, so we can tell exactly what our water inputs are. Like again, with capillary out in the desert, you're gonna get a little evaporation, so we are constantly adding some water to that tank,
Right.
just because you're still gonna get a little evaporation, and it allows us to truly see what each tee is doing. We know exactly what the water input is. As a matter of fact, I think last week was the first time they went out to um, grade each of the tees and start gathering data. Now that's
Yeah.
going to be a couple-year study, but it's in its infancy. Like I said, they did the first evaluations last week.
So it sounds like you guys are doing a lot of R&D on this. What are some of the biggest things that you've discovered and then maybe changed based on the initial design work on this and where you are today? I mean, it just seems like it's a moving target and there's a lot of ups and downs. But what have you found that had really kind of was an aha moment that made you say, hey, we got to tweak this and make this better?
It's been a little bit of everything. It's been incremental improvements, like the control package. We've kind of changed some things, some of the
Yeah, I would think that
units
would be a changing thing or moving.
in there, like the air pumps. We'll find a more efficient air pump,
Yeah.
or one that may be a little more robust.
How big is the air pump? I mean, I can't imagine it needs to be that big.
They're small.
So
They're
it's a big aquarium, literally a big aquarium pump.
almost.
Now,
Yep.
are you building these, or are you guys you're
No,
manufacturing all of this?
we're building. We buy the components and then build the control
Right.
package
So this
ourselves.
is your design work, your engineering, your design work, and your
Yes.
manufacturing. Where's the
And
manufacturing being done?
Wellington, Florida, and then our international headquarters are in Gothenburg, Sweden. That's where Martin lives, our owner.
Okay.
So a lot of the work is done over there. Our main engineer is over there, and they work with. We're doing some work with Gothenburg College, I think is the name of the school, where their engineering department is kind of working on some stuff with us, and um, so it's a little more than just us two. We're involving some other engineers, and there's a lot of ideas coming in, even from us, because as we see the stuff in the field, it's like, oh yeah, I wonder if we do this when we ask the questions. And Martin is one of the ultimate tinkerers that I've ever met in my life. He's constantly thinking about
Hey,
stuff. So
entrepreneurs, man, that's what you're doing. Big thinkers.
crazy the way his mind works. We
Yeah.
do a Friday meeting every week of our sales staff just to kind of catch up, and because we're all scattered to the four corners every
Yeah.
week. And there was one week we were talking about our edge product that we have is a synthetic edge for the bunker. And he said, guys, I was sitting there at dinner last night and I got this idea. And he literally
Uh-oh.
holds up a cocktail napkin with a
That's
drawing on it. And this is what I'm thinking. I need y'all's feedback on this. It was just crazy, but that's how a lot of these ideas come to him. We're out in the field, and the way Capillary was born, I asked him when they hired me on. I said, how did this come to your mind?"
what the hell
And
were you
Martin,
smoking that got this
well,
into your head?
He was a superintendent. He's been a superintendent, golf pro, and a golf course owner.
Oh, wow.
So
That's a
he
career.
said, putting my superintendent hat on, I got sick of messing with bunkers every time it rained. I said,
Yeah.
I think that's universal with every superintendent.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
That he just started playing around in his garage with different concrete mixtures and what form and how thickness and everything else. And that's literally how the product came to life.
Wow.
I mean, it's just an entrepreneur mind works very different than a typical
Yes, it
golfer.
does. Yeah. And you have to have a big fat head, like say I do, to be able to hold all this crap in your brain. But that's how it works.
I would never have thought of any of that, honestly.
I always keep a notepad by my bed because I wake up at 3 almost every night now, and I have all sorts of things racing through my head. Of course, chicken shit's not so hard to, think about, but there's subtleties to what you're doing. Let me go back in the little bit of time that we had. Let me go back to the core product, the actual bunker product, and let's talk about that, because I'm sure that's probably where a lot of your money is made, and a lot, and you've been, you certainly built a reputation, and I guess we're dealing with what? There's a couple hardscape, Better Billy, and then you guys. And they're similar in the nature of what they do. But the process of putting this into a bunker is, obviously redoing the bunker, you pull everything out, and is it similar to the way you described the hydroponic, or walk me through, if I'm building a bunker with capillary concrete, what's the process so I understand that?
So you're basically you're gonna core the bunker out, get rid of all your old. So I'm gonna base this on we're doing a renovation.
Right,
So you're
that's
gonna
fair.
core the bunker out. We generally recommend guys check their drain tile, and actually it's easier if you replace the drain tile at that point
I
because
would
we're
think you
getting
would
ready to
want to, yeah.
put 2 inches of concrete across everything. So
Yeah, why
you
not
want
make it as good as you can possibly make it? You only
yes,
got one shot at that one, so fix it.
test our outfall. If the outfall is good, we just reconnect to the outfall, drainage in, gravel to the top of the trench, just like you would do with any liner or no liner. And then we come in and we pour 2 inches of capillary material across the entire floor of the
So you
bunker.
literally just come in with like a cement, with a hose and blow it in, and then
Oh no, we can't blow it in. It's a little dry. The stuff the material comes off the truck looking like Rice Krispie treats. That's the best
oh really?
image I
Okay,
can give you coming off the truck. There's very little water in it because at that point we're using the cement as paste. So
gotcha.
each stone is coated in the paste, and all we're trying to do is where those stones press together, the paste just makes them stick.
Right, holding them together.
So
Gotcha.
you can't
How's
you
it
couldn't
actually applied? I mean, how you doing? How you actually putting it in?
so it'll show up to the golf course in a ready mix truck,
Yeah.
ready to go with our additive in it. It's ready to apply in the field. We'll have guys will either use like a Pronovos trailer or we'll use a little Wacker Newsom little center pivot dump trailer or
Gotcha.
dump truck. We'll haul it wherever on the course. Normally, each site's different, but if we've got a road crossing or something, we can get the truck relatively close. We'll fill it up in a dump trailer. Dump trailer goes to the bunker. A lot of the contractors will have a mini X and they'll
Right.
place it with the mini X. There's some guys in the bunker with rakes and stuff. And we just a 2 inch depth gauge and they'll measure it across to 2 inches. And the way we finish it is with a textured paint roller. We're not putting any down pressure on it. We don't want to screed the concrete because we don't want to compact it and lose our pore space.
Right.
So that roller, all we do when we roll the top of it is we're just making sure that top layer of stone, we've got good contact
Yeah.
with the top layer of stone.
What
And then the
happens if
lowest,
what happens if it shifts a little bit and you got 2.5 inches on one side and 2 inches on the other? I mean, is it
not a huge deal.
okay?
We want it as close to 2 inches as we can get it, but
Yeah.
there's a little bit of wiggle room. And obviously the contractors are looking at it. They don't want to put excess down because it
Of
costs
course
them
not.
money.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes sense.
So in the low point of the bunker, we do a form and we'll do a 2x2 vault essentially over the drain tile. Normally it's pretty close to the outfall just because that's the low point of the bunker
Right.
anyway.
Right.
And then we have a capillary wash box, which is notched to fit over the drain tile, and it looks similar to kind of a valve box. And what we do is we'll drop that into that vault. It fits tight against the pipe, and there's a lid on it. And normally it's right about the level of the grade of the capillary, the lid. And then we backfill that entire area around the wash box with straight sand.
Mm-hmm.
And then, we
Tamp
add
that
our
down. Yeah.
traditionally in the southeast, a lot of guys are using G angle and tour angle sands. So we know that it's a 5 inch depth is what we want to apply in the floor of
Mm-hmm.
the bunker to compact down to 4. So we're gonna have 4 inches of sand over everything. And the wash box allows you to do just what it says. It allows you to wash your sand. So
Mm.
if you need to wash your sand, and the example I normally use is if you've got a north facing bunker, especially this time of year where guys aren't raking their bunkers every day and that kind of thing, you'll start to get some algae in those north facing bunkers.
Yeah. That makes sense. Yeah. You see that.
So the traditional way to fix that is you send a couple of guys with flat shovels and a workman and you scoop off that top layer of sand that's contaminated and you add some sand. The capillary material is strong enough that it can take the pressure from your irrigation system. So you would hook up a hose to your quick coupler and normally like a fire nozzle, an adjustable fire nozzle, and you would literally start washing the sand at the high point of the bunker,
You're
working
just
your way
pushing it
down.
through.
Well, no, it doesn't push it through. What happens is the algae, any silt particles, any clay, any organic matter, it's all lighter than the sand particles. So it comes to the surface and then all that water is flowing in the surface flow down to the wash box.
Oh, gotcha. Okay, that's cool.
Now, when that lid's off, there's an extension that takes you up 4 inches that gets you right at your finished grade, basically where your sand is.
Yeah.
And inside the wash box, we'll cut the drain tile and we put a T in it. So what happens is all that contaminated water ends up going into the wash box, into that T, and out
Oh,
the outfall.
gotcha. That's where it
So
goes.
when you're done with the bunker, you stick your hose in the outfall for 10 or 15 minutes, flush it really well, take the extension off, put the lid back on, and bury it. So where that factors in comes into the cost of ownership of the bunker. We'd save you a ton of money because you're not having to replace sand. And I'll throw another example out there. We did a course, one of my customers last year in South Georgia, actually 2 years ago, where they had a sand pit on site that they wanted to use.
Yeah.
So first recommendation is send the sand off. We need to get it tested. We need physical property.
Does it meet spec? Yeah.
And we need a water release curve because the water release curve for the sand dictates our sand depth where we know we're going to get that
To get it down to the capillary
flush.
Yeah.
When it's again like the perched water table in a green.
Mm-hmm.
So the sand tested it met spec, but in our fines and silt category, you want to be below 3% in each of those.
Gotcha.
So we were 2.8 something, 2.89 in one, and I think 2.75 in the other. So technically they met spec, but they were real close in those two. So we were a little concerned with after a couple of years that sand sealing off. So the conversation was we're going to just put wash boxes in every green or every bunker, and the bigger bunkers we might put 2 in. And then the superintendent basically that first year went out the first winter and they started washing the sand and being proactive with managing the bunkers. And basically we modified the physical property of that sand.
So you're washing the fines out? Is that what you're saying?
Washing the fines and the silt out.
And that just goes down the wash box and then out.
And out. So the money they saved on the sand and trucking,
yeah,
by far dwarfed the little bit of labor they had washing those bunkers. So I mean, it was kind
how
of
thick is the sand on top of the concrete in the bunker?
Generally 4 inches. Like I said, in the southeast, and it depends on the sand that's where we want to look at that water release curve. But I know with the G angle and the tour angles, 4 inches are kind of our magic number.
And again, the stupid question of the days. I mean, you brought this up very early, but the perception of concrete under the bunker, is it ever affected? Does the golfer ever hit it? I mean, is it ever a concern? I mean, and this is obviously part of the sales pitch that a superintendent, if interested in a process like this, has to be able to explain to the novice. So, I mean, it's never really, I mean, even in the worst, because it's holding the sand in place. So that 4 inches is always consistent and the bunker's always playable. And it's actually kept drier, or the water is managed properly. So you're not, like you said, fried eggs aren't as prevalent and you're not sitting there saturated. So you're trying to slug through a monstrously heavy sand and trying to get up.
And let's be honest, the reason the sand gets thin in most bunkers is because when they wash after a rainstorm, you're just pushing them up. You're just trying to get the bunker back in play. You're not checking depths. You're not, you got a guy out there, a couple guys with Sand Pro and a blade and a couple of shovels. Yeah. And they're just trying to get done
aesthetics
to get
at that point
back in play.
Yeah.
So by the sand not moving, you generally don't see those issues. And actually, I still maintain that golf course superintendents are probably some of the most resourceful people in the world.
Hands down.
So we've had
MacGyvers.
We've had a couple of superintendents. Have you ever seen the little survey whiskers that they're about yay tall? They're 3 to 4 inches tall and they come with a nail. A lot of times you'll see them on corners.
Oh,
like
yeah.
Or something because there's a spike attached to them. They hammer them down in there and they can be in the grass. So you can always kind of find them. They're normally like in a day glow fluorescent color.
Yeah.
Well, we've had a couple of superintendents kind of go one further and they'll actually drop those into the concrete before it sets. And I have one club that they took, we took a color, I think it was red we used, and they put it over the drain tile. So he knew where his drain tile was, and there wasn't a whole lot of that sticking up. But then on probably about a 5 by 5 foot grid, they would drop one in that was flush, and then they would come back and trim to like 3.5 inches. So he knew that if somebody raking the bunker, if they saw that day glow pink little whisker start to
There's
stick
an
out,
indicator.
they
That's
needed to
brilliant.
go and check their sand depth. Now, our best management practices in a perfect world, we want the superintendents to kind of spot check their sand depths once a quarter, but realistically, it's once or twice a year.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
again, with the sand not moving, you don't have those same issues. It changes the way you manage your bunker a little bit.
So the sand doesn't move and it drains. So you got a 3-inch rain. You're back in that bunker the next morning.
Yes.
Yeah. How does this compare to, and I don't mean to sound disrespectful at all to any other product, but to Better Billy? What I mean, and this is your platform. So how do you compare yourselves to your competitor in that regard?
So the couple of big differences between us and Better Billy. So Better Billy is 2 inches of gravel that they apply a polymer to. And that polymer is probably only penetrating a 1/4 inch to maybe 1/2 inch. You can't force it down far enough.
Yeah.
Um, so if you ever hit that and crack that polymer, you're going to start seeing gravel come up through the polymer.
Gotcha.
You're going to end up with a little hole. Whereas capillary, it's a 2 inch homogeneous mix. It's concrete. It's the same on the top as it is on the bottom. So it eliminates any of that and any worry of stone coming up
Yeah.
into the sand. And then the other biggest thing is the fact that we can move water up and down. You
Yeah.
know, it allows us again to maintain that moisture level in that sand so much better. Better Billy can only move water down through the sand. They can't bring anything.
Are you moving water up in a bunker? Are you moving it with a pump?
No. I mean that's that
It just
capillary.
because it's capillary,
The
so it'll move
capillary
up
action.
osmotic. Like, gotcha.
Yes.
Interesting.
So those are the
I'm
two biggest differences.
I'm fascinated by the technology, and I always love innovative technologies. And and I love your honesty about the whole hydroponic setup. And I know people are going to find you at all the trade shows this season, and hopefully come and get you. If somebody wants to find you, how are they going to find you? What's a good way to get a hold of you or
Our
Capillary
website,
Concrete?
which is capillaryflow.com, to be
Okay,
honest
it's
with you, our website.
capillaryflow.com. So find you
Yes.
through that. And
Yep.
obviously you're probably tagged on that as well.
All
But
of
yeah,
our information, all our sales guys throughout the country are there. We'll obviously we'll be at SFMA next week, which is Sports Fields
I'll
Managers in
see you
Daytona.
there.
And then we'll be in Phoenix at the
The GIS.
GCSA
Yeah,
show. And I wasn't completely prepared and I don't have our booth numbers,
that's all right.
but
They'll find you
it,
if they want. We
in
might not even
Phoenix,
get on the air before GIS. We might get you on the air the week of the GIS. We'll see yet. We don't know what the schedule is, but regardless, you're still findable through the website. And like I said, I've run into you a handful of times, and I'm always intrigued by the innovation. I think it's any kind of innovation like this. It's funny because Kevin Hicks interviewed Greg Baer, who's an irrigation specialist, on the podcast a couple of weeks ago, which is well worth listening to, by the way. Cheap pitch. But Greg was kind of talking about there's not a whole lot of innovation in irrigation. But what you guys are doing is and you've admitted it. There's a bunch of bugs to work out, but in a couple of years, when you guys start to really get this thing nailed down, it's fascinating that you can do that. And there's no question the biggest challenge in our industry is going to be managing water. I mean, quality of
it's
water
not
and
a
volume.
question of if, it's when.
It's
I mean, let's
when.
be honest.
Yeah. I mean, even here in the Northeast where I'm sitting now, I mean, it's going to ultimately be an issue. I mean, you and I, we all know superintendents that have $1 million budget for just water, which, the guys out here and in the Northeast are like, what the $1 million for
And
my whole
obviously
budget?
with the hydroponics, our big focus initially is going to be the Southwest.
Yeah, I would think so.
Again, Las Vegas, Clark County with those regulations and everything else. And again, in the Southeast and Northeast, where we're seeing 70 to 80 inches of rain a year, it's a little bit of a harder conversation to start,
Yeah.
but
But you're
it's
drying
going to
them
be,
out. So, I mean, it's
yeah.
the reverse. Instead of actually saving water, you're keeping the thing from just being, a pool of water.
Well, and years ago when I first moved to Georgia back in '08, the Southeast was going through a pretty dramatic drought.
Yeah.
And the state of Georgia started looking at some things, and Marcus Soda was on the board, one of the golf course superintendents that was on the board at that time. And Mark's, actually, I think he was president. Mark's push was if you're not driving the bus, you're going to get run over by the bus.
Yeah, you're
So
gonna get hit by the
basically,
bus, right?
the Superintendents Association in Georgia went to the legislature and said, "Look, we're the subject matter experts on this. Let us help you write these best management
Good.
practices and these water restrictions because we manage our water better than almost anybody else, and we can show you how we do that."
Yeah.
This is, to me, this is kind of the same effect. When the water restrictions come down, the courses that have started to adopt this new technology with ours and some others as well, those are the guys that aren't going to have to worry. You know what? We're well on our way here. We're just going to keep doing what we're doing. They're
Yeah.
not going to be scrambling
Makes
last
sense.
minute. But it truly is a question, not a question of if, it's when.
Yeah, well, and everybody's going to be dealing with water issues and and availability. I mean, like you said, there's no question it's going to be a question of when, regardless of where you are. I mean, like even here in the Northeast, we get really wet seasons, but then we also get this long stretch of drought, and that's where and it's not only saving money, but it's also controlling the quality of that soil profile. So I'm fascinated by it, Cory. I got to say, when we started talking about it. I've always been fascinated, and I'm thrilled that you gave me some time to talk about it, and hopefully people see the innovation and seek you out, and at least ask the right questions. And I would be willing to bet it would be a good idea for us to get you back in a year or two when you guys have this down a little bit even further, and we can talk about real examples and see what it's looking like in the field.
Well, and one of the things that I'd love to show you, and again, this will be after the podcast goes out, but come by SFMA, our booth, because we've got a working model of a hydroponic system.
Yeah, I'll see you I'll see you at that show. Again,
The
this
next
is
2
going to
weeks.
probably air after the
Yeah,
SFMA,
but
or as I call it,
we
the
can,
STMA.
okay.
But
But now we can, like in a couple of years, we'll have some. I think next year even we'll have some video of
good.
installs going in, how it works, and actually the system in operation. So yeah, I'd love to come back and show you some of these innovations
Yeah.
that we're working on now.
It's fascinating, dude. And the innovation, like I said, is where we need to be, and you're certainly dealing with one of the pressing issues. Water is going to be the big issue for the next generations of superintendents. So what you guys are doing is quite amazing. So I keep it up, and I hate to say that, but we're way out of time, and I'm going to wrap this thing up. But Cory Blair at Capillary Concrete, thank you so much for your time and your friendship over all these years. I will see you at probably the next couple of weeks while
Yes,
trade
sir.
show season is upon us. But if anybody has an interest, reach out. And I've known Cory for a long time. He's very honest and straightforward, and he'll show you what they're doing. And like I said, the innovation is spectacular. So best of luck to you, my friend, and I wish you the best. And if you haven't subscribed to the Earthworks podcast, please do, so that we can inform you when we have cool and innovative conversations like the one we just had with Cory Blair. Cory, thank you so much for joining me. I appreciate it.
Not a problem, Joel. It's been enjoyable. Thank you.